Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Appia Feature Review. Thank you for joining us. My name is Gavin Diaz, and I'll serve as your moderator today. We are very excited to share some of Appia's newest features with you, but before we begin, we'll need to cover a few housekeeping items so that we're all on the same page. Throughout today's webinar, you will be muted. Don't worry, we can't hear you, but we would like for you to participate. There's a Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen that we will be monitoring. Please use this to ask any questions that you have throughout today's webinar. We will address as many questions as we can. However, any questions that we are not able to address will be compiled and all registered participants will receive an email in about a week. Finally, we understand that we're all using Zoom with varying internet connections, which may bring challenges. You may experience connection issues, but please note that a recording of this webinar will be available next week. Speaking of challenges with remote work, if you hear any barking, I would like to apologize ahead of time. It's probably just Lewis or Scout protecting us from the evil Amazon Prime delivery guys. Now that we've introduced our dogs, we may as well introduce ourselves. I'm joined today by Alyssa Williams of Infotech's onboarding team. Alyssa has over 8 years of experience at Infotech and currently leads the onboarding team for Infotech products, including PNDoc Express, and Appia. Alyssa has supported, onboarded, and trained some of Infotech's largest accounts and is a subject matter expert on our e-construction solutions. Welcome, Alyssa. I have worked for Infotech for over 7 years with a focus on training, support, and account management for Infotech's e-construction initiatives. I would like to thank everyone again for joining us today, especially those that attended our last session that covered best practices with remote online bidding. Our plan today is to pick up where we left off and review the workflow after contractors' bids have been opened. I will cover this portion before handing the presentation over to Alyssa, who will provide details on 3 of Appia's newest features: Business Center, Worksheets, and Query. Next, Alyssa will provide an explanation for what to look out for next from the Appia team. Finally, we will wrap up with a question and answer session. Please remember to use the Q&A feature within Zoom located at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to address any question that you have. Remember, questions that we are not able to address will be included with a link to the recording. As I mentioned in the previous slide, we wanted to pick up where we left off earlier this month and talk about some features that have recently been updated within Appia. Not all of these are brand new, but we did feel it was important to highlight them for several reasons. If you joined us earlier in May for our webinar on remote online bidding, you'll remember there was discussion around automating the report generation process. The Appia export, which is produced by the bidexpress.com service, will provide agencies and consultants with an in-depth bid tabulation already formatted for import into the Appia service. Typically, Appia users will then take this report to create their project and run a bid analysis before setting a notice to proceed or NTP date. Finally, the last item that we'll look at before Alyssa shows some of Appia's newest features is users' ability to enter daily diaries prior to that NTP date. Next, I have a couple of screens that we'll go over that will cover some of what was on the last slide. As you can see here, bidexpress.com agencies and consultants can pull the automatically generated Appia export after bids have been opened simply by clicking the actions icon. Remember, this report requires no formatting changes, and the 2 systems share the same login credentials. Users that are both managing their solicitation and construction administration processes online are seeing time savings in the project setup phase because of this step. Once the report has been imported from BidExpress, consultants and agencies get a graphical dashboard that shows comparisons across contractor submissions and can include the engineer's estimate. Submissions are compared based on the individual item deviation and each item's weight against the entire bid. Users typically find this analysis makes it easier to identify unbalanced bids and address any cost concerns prior to finalizing a contract. Daily diaries are now available for entry prior to the NTP date. This was another highly requested change from your feedback. The most common entries that we have seen so far are related to pre-site work like utility installation. So this covers some of the features that we felt were important to talk about and highlight in today's session, although they are not all part of the most recent Appia update. That's what Alyssa is going to talk to us about now. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Alyssa, who will talk to us a little bit more about some of those newest features.
Great, thanks, Gavin. And thank you guys for attending today. So I'm going to first start talking about a little bit about Business Center within Appia. So many of our users work with various different entities across many different projects, and often they're interacting with these projects in different roles. So we introduced Business Center as a way to interact with different organizations under one login. Efficiency was definitely one of our goals with this effort. So within one login, you can maintain various roles and levels of access while easily toggling across different sets of projects. So you can see an example of this on my screen. For example, you can maintain read-only access or oversight access to one set of projects while maintaining project manager status on another. So this is going to increase collaboration across all the projects you're involved in and make it easier to complete all the tasks you're responsible for within those projects. So talking a little bit about how this happens and how Business Center is set up, quite honestly, it's pretty hands-off. As soon as you're granted access to another organization's Appia projects, you'll see those project sets listed in the Business Center. It's as simple as that. So when you log into Appia, you obviously see your list of projects like you can see on my screen here. But as soon as you click into the Business Center, which is highlighted on the screen in blue, you're able to see and toggle over to any other projects you've been given access to. So a big efficiency gain for those that are working on multiple projects from various owners, different entities. So definitely take advantage of that. So bear with me, this is where I switch over to the live portion of the demo. We'll be talking about Worksheets, which is Appia's solution for capturing item-based measurements, and our new query feature. Bear with me, I'm gonna get it right. All right. So focusing on Worksheets first, talking a little bit about some of the benefits of this feature. So many of our users are navigating pretty manual processes when capturing item-based measurements in the field, and then using those measurements to post quantities within daily reports. So we introduced Worksheets as a way to help automate calculations in the field. One of Appia's core functions is daily reporting. So allowing Appia to capture the measurements already being collected serves as an additional efficiency gain for our users, and hopefully it's going to limit the manual process around those measurements and the calculations. So with Worksheets, Appia is going to track your item-based measurements and prompt you when those measurements are needed within your daily reports. Something to note is that Worksheets are set up on a project-by-project basis and can also be item-specific within a project. So not all of your projects or even the items within your projects have to use Worksheets. If you do choose to use Worksheets, you'll automatically be prompted to use the worksheet and enter your measurements within a daily report, which you can see on my screen here. Based on the associated worksheet, Appia will prompt you to enter the measurements needed. So I'm looking at a square foot worksheet here. I'm going to put in my measurements. So I can see the calculation behind the formula or the worksheet, which is just length times width in feet in this case. I enter my measurements. I can also preview my results. So in this case, 476 square feet of this item. Once I enter my measurements here, you can see that I'm returned to the daily report and the calculated result becomes the quantity placed for the item. So it's taking those measurements, turning it into quantity placed. Another thing to mention is that many of our users said it was important to be able to manually adjust these calculations to account for any irregularities. This never ever happens. This is construction we're talking about. But if the area you're measuring isn't perfectly square, for example, we want to be able to account for that. So you are able to manually override these values, which you can see I just did. If you do that, on my screen, you'll see a manual override flag. We are keeping track of the calculated quantity versus the quantity that was actually placed. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and save here, and I'm going to show you how Appia is going to keep track of all those measurements in the background. So I'm going to navigate over to item history, and this is going to show us all the worksheet details for this item. So item history is an existing feature. We just added some worksheet information here. So down at the bottom of item history, you'll see a worksheets area. This is where you can look at all the daily reports that used the worksheet. In this case, it's a square foot worksheet. You can see all of the calculations, the length, the width, as well as the calculated value and the quantity placed. So you'll have all that data rolled up into one view. And you can also export the data to Excel, or scrolling back to the top of the page, you can turn it out to PDF if you need to. So there's two ways to get the data out of the system if you need to manipulate it on your own or send it to someone else. So if you choose to use worksheets on your Appia projects, there are a total of 18 built-in worksheets, including worksheets for square foot, which we just saw, square yard, and volume, just to name a couple. So I'm going to switch over to our next feature, actually our newest, which is query. So our current users probably noticed the new query tab over here in the sidebar. So before we dive too far into query, I want to give a little bit of backstory on this feature. As our current Appia users know, we have many built-in PDF reports. And as you can imagine, working with so many different users across various states leads to a good number of requests for new PDF reports or PDF report modifications. Since Appia is software as a service, every update we do affects all of our users. So we do have to carefully consider those updates and make sure they're equally valuable and usable to everyone. So this is where query came into play. In addition to our built-in PDF reports, we wanted to introduce a way for our users to build their own custom queries, leading to more flexibility with project data and reporting. So we released Query in late 2019 in a labs format. You might be wondering what that even means. Labs is a tool that Infotech uses to introduce new features in production and gather feedback while we're still developing that feature. So Query is definitely available, as you can see on my screen, but we are still very much in feedback mode. So our goal was to release an initial version, gather your feedback in-app while you're using Query, and then iterate and improve based on that feedback. You can actually see the feedback modal on my screen over in the bottom left. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I'm going to minimize it for now. So let's walk through building a custom query. So again, I'm within the new query tab. The first thing you'll want to do is select what you're querying on. So right now, the only data set we have is project items. I'll talk a little bit more about what's next for query in our next segment. We're going to select project items in this case. I can change the orientation of the page. If you have a lot of data columns, you can change to landscape. And then down below, you can start building the header and the body of the report. So let's say in the header, I need the project ID, the description, notice to proceed, awarded, and authorized. So I'm just cherry picking the data I need. You can drag and drop and put them in the right order if you're used to a specific order or you're trying to mimic a current report. Next, I'll scroll down to the body of the report itself, and same idea, I'm going to grab the data columns that I need. So let's say line number, item ID, description, maybe unit, quantity placed, quantity remaining. Keep in mind you can drag and drop, get them in the right order. As soon as you have your report built, you can scroll to the top of the page and preview what the report's going to look like. I'm sorry for all the scrolling, but you'll start to see the report build out. You can get a feel for what it's going to look like. You can bring in new columns, you can change the order, any changes you need to do at this point. And then you have two options. You can use the report button to generate a PDF in the format that you just built, or under actions, you can come in and use the export option, which just sends the data to Excel for you guys to manipulate on your own. So two ways to get the report out if you need to. But another important thing to look at is the ability to save. So let's say you come in and you build a report and it's really helpful, you know you're going to use it on a frequent basis. You can come in and save the query. So when you click save, it's going to prompt you to name it. Let's just say report number 1. As soon as you save this query, anyone who has access to the Appia project can then run that same query, and they don't have to build it every time they want to run it. So I'm going to refresh my page. Let's say I'm a different user, or maybe I'm the same user in a different session. I come into the query tab. I don't have to build out the query. Instead of doing that like we just went through, I would come in and use a saved query. So you can see I have some examples built out. Maybe I'm looking for an underrun report. As soon as I select the saved query, it'll show me the structure if you want to double check what it has. You can use the preview feature to get the most updated data, and then you can run it to PDF or Excel. So that's really helpful. Again, you don't want to have to build out those queries every single time. So you can definitely save it and make it available to you at a later date or anyone who can access the project. So that's our new query function in its current state. If I can end with any kind of recap for query, feedback is definitely key. We know how important this is to our users. We are still working on it, but we'd love to hear your feedback and know how we can continue to make it as valuable as possible. So talking a little bit more about that feedback menu, I'm going to show it again. You'll see this on your screen when you're interacting with query. You can use this to tell us your thoughts about query, good or bad. We want to hear it all. So you'll see options to report an issue, to send in an enhancement request for query, or just give us your general comments on it as well. This feedback does come directly to our team and is something we are continuously looking at as we further enhance our query function. So that's going to wrap up query in its current state. The next segment of the webinar is going to start talking about some of the features that are coming soon, but one of our initiatives is focused on query. So I'll pause here and talk about that before we jump back over to the slides and then go into questions. So kind of on our feedback theme, the biggest things we've heard about query so far are the ability to query on payment data. So, pretty important. You want to know what's going on with your payments and build out your own payment reports. And the ability to save queries across multiple projects. So right now, when you build a query, it is by each project, and we want to open that up and make it available to all the projects, so you don't have to build it each time. So these are the things we're working towards with query and are the changes you'll see in our next query release later this year. So talking a little bit more about another effort that's on the horizon, this is forecast or project cost tracking. The goal of this initiative or this feature is to give our users the ability to better track project cost in Appia. So taking the monthly actuals, comparing them back to a baseline for the overall project. You'll be able to enter the monthly cost and track that against the project baseline. You can see a preview of this on my screen. This project was really, really close, not a lot of variance. Hopefully yours is the same. But you can see the data displayed on a graph, pretty easy to grasp. And as a little note, if you've accessed Appia's overview tab in the last few weeks, you may have noticed that we introduced the first part of this feature, and we're actively working on the others. So definitely stay tuned and be on the lookout for the other releases. So that concludes the overview of some of the things you can expect to see in Appia, as well as a live demo of some of our newer features. I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Gavin, and we'll open it up for some Q&A.
Thanks, Alyssa. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us. We're going to go ahead and address some of the questions that are coming in. We had a few that came in while you were presenting. As a reminder to everyone, please feel free to utilize the Q&A feature. That should be located at the bottom of your screen. So go ahead and, Alyssa, if you're ready, jump in with the first question that came in, and that was, how do my contractors have access to change order progress?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, there's multiple ways to accomplish this, though it's not the majority. Some of our users will allow their contractor to have Appia access to see change order data in real time. Others will provide Appia's change order PDF report to their contractor. So they're just sending them the report rather than giving them access to Appia. And then others will use Infotech's Doc Express service to route the change orders automatically to their contractors for review and signature. So there's multiple ways to get your contractor involved when you're using Appia for change orders. It really just depends which one makes the most sense for you and your contractor.
Thanks, Alyssa. The next question that came in was, can options be added to create custom worksheets in the future?
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely great feedback for us to have. You know, when we released worksheets, we envisioned that maybe there is a future where instead of our built-in worksheets, there's a way for users to add their own. Certainly more to be discovered there, but that's great feedback for us to have and something we can definitely consider for the future.
Yeah, feedback is key. If I can add on that, Alyssa, a lot of the features that we're talking about today and features that the team has completed in the past came from your feedback. I would guess an overwhelming majority. So please keep that feedback coming. We appreciate everyone's participation today and that continued feedback. It certainly helps us improve as much as we can. The other question was in regards to, I believe when you were building one of the queries, Alyssa, specifically, is that a double click that you're doing to drag those columns in, or are you just single clicking?
It's a single click or a drag and drop. So either one will work. I typically use Chrome, but both of those options should work regardless of your browser.
One question that came in as well were, can the queries be role specific?
Great question. Currently, they are not. So anyone can build a query because it's not manipulating project data. So anyone with project access can build a query, but definitely something we can consider for the future if we need to, you know, maybe lock it down a little bit further.
Yeah, and that's a great point in segueing into the business center that you showed us as well earlier, and just limiting that project access.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm just going to keep checking the Q&A here, so bear with me. One question that came in here, Alyssa, and they're going away from me. How is the project baseline generated or calculated for the project tracking feature?
Sure. So that is not something we've finished yet, but the baseline is basically imported. So you can take an Excel file, import it, and then every month you can add your actual cost, and it's going to compare back to that baseline. So it's an Excel import, but you know, still in progress for sure.
I'm going to keep monitoring these Q&A. And again, everyone, please feel free to continue to ask questions. I will get to as many of them as we can. And those that we can't get to, will certainly go out with a copy of the webinar. So this question is asking if Appia can make adjustments based on index dollar amounts, specifically ones related to fuel, AC content adjustments, those kind of fuel adjustments, it looks like.
Sure. Yeah, Appia does have a function around fuel and asphalt and steel adjustments. So that is definitely something you can do. You can put in your asphalt factor, you can create or log the index price when the project is advanced over, and then you can use Appia to do the adjustments. So definitely a feature we have. You can find more information about it in help, but certainly call our support team and we can definitely help you out with that as well.
Thanks, Alyssa. And one question came in regarding Appia and Doc Express. It looks like, I know we didn't talk a lot about Doc Express today, but for those that don't know, Doc Express is a solution that's tied in with Appia's same login credentials, similar to BidExpress. And that question was, will I ever be able to print my PDFs generated in Appia and send them directly to a drawer in Doc Express?
I should have expected that question from Mike. Hey, Mike. The short answer is I hope so. The longer answer is that's definitely something we still have to figure out. So it's very much on our radar to get Appia and Doc Express more integrated than they are now. But I don't have concrete answers on what that looks like or when that actually happens. So Mike, as soon as I know, you will be one of the first to know.
So we have one more question here, Alyssa. This one is in regards to, let me see here. Sorry, there are so many coming in. projects just over a certain amount of time. The question is, sometimes my projects will run for multiple years. Do I have to create a new project to analyze bid tabs after I've already begun construction?
Mm, okay. Yeah, this is a common question I get in implementation. You do not have to create a new project to analyze your bids. So if you're using Appia's bid analysis feature when you're building the project, so whether you pull them in from bidexpress.com or however you get those bids now, and you use Appia's bid analysis like Gavin showed in the beginning, that data is going to stay with the project through its entire life cycle. So even after you award the project and advance it over to construction, that bid data remains with it and you can access it anytime. So no need to rebuild or anything like that.
Great. Okay, so it looks like we do have some more questions coming in here. The next one for you, Alyssa, is if I decide to use worksheets, do I have to use it for every item in the contract?
Another common question. You do not. So it was overwhelming feedback when we were developing worksheets that I don't want to have to use it on every single item. Measurements don't apply to everything. So you definitely do not have to use it on every item or even every project. You do have a few options to set up worksheets. You can do them globally, setting them up for every project via reference data, or you can go on a project by project basis. Either way, you can associate a worksheet to some items, but not others. So it really just depends what items you need measurements for.
Thanks, Alyssa. This question is in regards to, I think, some of the PDF reports that Appia will export. Is there a way to control where the page break happens on those PDF reports?
There is not, and I am not technical, but my understanding is that it's dependent on the content of where the page is going to break. Some reports have standard breaks, some don't, but it is not something that's user controlled. It's something that the system is doing automatically.
Okay, I'm going to try to address a couple of these longer questions too, so bear with me. For worksheets, if we have multiple measurements, can that be done for one worksheet for areas for large concrete pours, for example, so one payment can be issued on the DWR?
Hopefully I'm understanding this question right, but how I've seen this done in the past, so it's you can place the same item more than once in a daily report. And if you need to log multiple measurements, say you're pouring in different areas, you can place that item more than once and log your measurements. So it's all going to go on the ledger. It would be on the same payment, the same report, but you would have to post the item more than once to enter multiple sets of measurements for that worksheet.
Thanks, Alyssa. So we have time for just one more question. So I'm going to go ahead and ask that now. But again, feel free to continue to ask those questions. We will address them in the follow-up to the webinar. This last question, Alyssa, is can I create forms that are used monthly? For example, contractor payment application, monthly construction report, and certification to the client, all with specific information that is both contract time-based and construction payment.
Sure. Yeah. So I'd probably have to get a better feel for exactly what those reports look like. But our real push is for query and for you guys to be able to create reports on any kind of data in Appia. So instead of relying on our canned built-in reports, giving you guys the flexibility to build your own, you know, if it's a pay app or a construction report, whatever it is, if we don't have it close enough, our goal is to use query for that. So I'd have to dig in to see if we have anything existing before we get there with Query Builder, but that's definitely the direction we're going to give you guys the flexibility to build your own and save them and, you know, however you need to use them rather than relying on us.
Thanks, Alyssa, and thanks everyone for asking questions. I know that we had some that we couldn't get to. Don't worry, we will address those, and all the registered participants will receive a follow-up email with those answers. So please be on the lookout for an upcoming webinar. This will be focused on e-construction administration and best practices. Should be sometime in July. Additionally, we do have an Appia referral program that we're very excited to announce that will be coming soon. More details on that as well. But again, don't hesitate to contact any of us here at Infotech about that, either Alyssa or myself. Just wanted to thank everyone again for joining us. You should receive an email with a survey link that will help us improve these future webinars. So we are really excited about doing these. We're really excited about the great participation that we had today. We do rely on that feedback to make these better. So, please feel free to take a couple minutes and do that if you can. Thanks everyone so much again. Have a great afternoon, and remember to keep washing your hands.